I'm Alex Proyas, the director of The CROW. There are a lot of myths about the making of this film, and I don't see it as my role to systematically go through each of those and discuss them, but I feel that it does make sense to have some voice of logic in the wilderness discussing this movie. And for me, I've always the important thing is I've always wanted the film to be Brandon's film. At this stage, it's important that people get a bit of a sense of the reality of the making of the film. I think the time has come to sort of see a little bit of that, honouring his memory, basically. I think that's the most important thing. Oh, well, all the visual effects in this film were done very, very inexpensively. I mean, it looks like a miniature, but that's fine because I've never been scared of that. I actually like things that look like miniatures. It's all the little flames coming out, which we went to elaborate measures to project into the miniature set. We had we did several runs, and we had little screens set up so we could physically project into the miniature on multiple passes. Kind of really before, I mean, it was really the very early days of digital imagery, and we didn't really have the money to use them, so we tried to do things in much more of an optical way as much as possible. Ernie Hudson, I really felt that for that character there had to be a great deal of humanity, and Ernie is an actor whose work I was obviously aware of before The CROW, and he always struck me as someone who you instantly liked and you felt this great warmth for. As soon as he appears on screen, within a few seconds, you sort of want to go hang out in a bar with him and talk about old times, though you may never have met him before. And to me, that's really this very simple and the simple reason why he was cast. I think he just basically brought a great deal of humanity to the film. I think the film is about a bunch of bad guys being killed by a character who has all the trappings and the art direction of a bad guy himself. And I guess, early on I was just really looking for this sort of emotional through line and emotional hook to the characters in the movie. And obviously, Rochelle, the little girl, and Ernie's character were really important characters in that respect. They really gave the film some heart, basically.
I don't care what her name is. I didn't get the order to move. Jesus, Albrecht. I can see why they took away your gold sheet.
Yeah, I wasn't a big enough asshole. Come on, let's go.
There is a big black bird in the movie, and it's called The CROW, and you'd think people would understand. I don't know, I think it's kind of it's a comic book thing, and I guess they always figure that the title should refer to the heroic character in the story, as comic book characters always do. But this is kind of an anti-comic book movie, or it's an anti-comic book, period, and it really does break a lot of the conventions that people have been conditioned to accepting through, the Supermans and the Batmans, etc. This is really trying to do something quite subversive in that genre, and part of that is this choice of title, I think.
And you're lying to me about Shelley. She's gonna die, isn't she?
Hey, come on, it's okay. It's gonna be fine.
At some point just as we were in pre-production, I realised that this film was like the ultimate gothic fantasy, as in terms of the goth subculture, I could be wrong, and maybe it's claiming more for the film than I should, but I sort of got the impression that this film was kind of instrumental in reviving the goth culture to a certain extent, because it was something that I mean, having, being someone who's been into music for a very long time now, I remember goths certainly in Australia and England being around in the early 80s. That's when the peak sort of impact of that sort of subculture hit England and Australia. In America, I wasn't really sure where they fit in. I was aware that they were around, but it seems like there's been this kind of rebirth of that. I know I'm seeing a lot more people on the streets, and that's fine because I think they look cool. So I really think that this had some impact on that. Once I sort of became aware of that, and I could see it so strongly in the styling of the comic books as well, we really went for it. I mean, we really pushed the film, stylistically, fashion and art direction-wise into that world, because I just thought it was not really done and hadn't really been done in movies that much.
What this place needs is a good natural.
I was working on the very early embryonic version of Dark City when I was made aware of the CROW, and I guess it wasn't. It certainly wasn't the Dark City script that I was working on at the time. Certainly was not the film that ended up being made. But I think there was a lot of cross-fertilisation between the two projects. If anything, I took the CROW story or the CROW world, the comic book, and sort of bent it somewhat into this other world that had been living in for quite some time, which is kind of the world of Dark City. And I think that's why the two films are so related, really.
Lake Erie actually caught on fire once from all the crap floating around in it. I wish I could have seen that.
I was involved with the film before we obviously had a cast and before Brandon was involved, but I believe that there had been some discussions with him at an early stage that I was not privy to. When he was put to me as a potential actor for this role, I instantly thought it was a perfect idea. This is the perfect person, and it's one of the few times that's actually happened. I think he lent this wonderful sort of poetry to the way he moved in not just in action sequences and in fight sequences, but in virtually everything he did in the movie. He really was an extraordinarily physically agile person, and so that just kind of rubbed off on every aspect of his performance. But he was, I think, very into the idea of amongst the carnage that's going on, to give this character a certain sense of beauty, just the way he moved. He was both frightening and beautiful at the same time, and part of how scary he was, what an incredible avenger he was in the film, was as a result of how fluidly he moved. It's something about would get from point A to point B so effectively. And that's really, this is all stuff that Brandon worked out. We talked about all this stuff, and he really worked very hard at the physicality of this character. He would look at the comic book and just the way the character would stand. And how in comic books, every moment in a comic book, because it's lovingly drawn by the artist, tends to be a sort of perfect physical moment. Everything is balanced just so, and we know that in a movie that's not often the case, but I think he really tried to bring that to that character so that whenever we saw him, he would be sitting in a certain way or moving in a certain way, and